Not long after achieving a decisive victory over the French colonialists at Dien Bien Phu in 1954, Vietnam once again fell into a state of division. The South Vietnamese government, backed by the United States, was determined to suppress the independence movement in the South. In a short time, the U.S. helped them build a formidable army, entirely equipped by the U.S. Immediately after replacing the French in South Vietnam, the U.S. provided massive aid, supplying all the weapons and military equipment to the local army. Furthermore, through direct aid and preferential mechanisms for capitalists in South Vietnam loyal to the Saigon government, the U.S. poured a huge amount of consumer goods into the region, creating a picture of prosperity but with virtually no underlying economic development impetus. The massive and almost non-refundable aid enabled countless officials and officers of the Republic of Vietnam to make a fortune by smuggling goods into the black market in Gia Dinh, Cho Lan, and Tay Ninh, from essential items like medicine and food to even weapons. Everything can be sold if the buyer has enough money. Furthermore, after the U.S. military officially entered the war, there were numerous instances of American soldiers siphoning off goods from warehouses for personal use, following the principle of using the enemy's weapons against the enemy. This supply was extremely useful for the forces of the National Liberation Front of South Vietnam. Most of the war supplies the Liberation Army purchased from the corruption of the Republic of Vietnam were transported to secret depots in the liberated areas. Of course, the loss of war supplies was only a minor issue for the U.S., as it could be easily compensated for thanks to its world-leading industrial base. But, paradoxically, no matter how much logistical support was provided to the American and Allied forces, it was never enough, while with just a small amount of weapons requisitioned from the enemy. The fighting strength of the South Vietnamese Liberation Army increased significantly. At 5 p.m. our troops opened fire, launching the campaign. 5 columns of our army broke through the enemy's defenses to advance into the heart of Saigon, seizing key government offices. At 10:45 a.m. our tanks and infantry advanced into the Independence Palace, capturing the entire cabinet of the Republic of Vietnam. Dong Van Minh, who had just become president on April 28th, was forced to declare unconditional surrender to our forces. That same day, the revolutionary flag was hoisted over the Independence Palace, signaling the complete victory of the historic Ho Chi Minh campaign. Not only did our army acquire weapons on the black market, but we also possessed countless extremely modern weapons and equipment left behind by the U.S. and remnants of the old regime before fleeing the battlefields of Vietnam. So, what famous American weapons became war trophies for Vietnam after the liberation on April 30, 1970? Let's take a look. The most valuable war trophy for us was the M113 armored vehicle. Why? The South Vietnamese army had approximately over 513 tanks in its inventory. Following the victory of Liberation Day, hundreds of vehicles were incorporated into the Vietnamese tank and armored forces. Of those, approximately 500 M113 armored vehicles are still in service. In the early 1970s, it was a very successful name. At that time, the M113 was the largest tracked armored vehicle available. By 1978, 40,000 units had been produced and sold widely to U.S. allies, at least 30 countries. The M113's primary armament was a Browning machine gun, mounted on a turret on top of the vehicle. However, this position made the gunner highly vulnerable to injury. A key advantage is that its top layer of armor requires no hardening or tempering process, simplifying the manufacturing process. The unique armor components, made of pure steel alloy, form the shield protecting the machine gunner on top of the vehicle. However, because the M113's armor is not capable of withstanding anti-tank weapons or even heavy machine guns, its primary mission is to protect soldiers moving on the battlefield from infantry weapons. Nevertheless, after joining the Vietnamese Army's armored forces, the M113 armored vehicle was fitted with an additional 106 140 recoilless rifle or a 75 KF6 recoilless rifle. Subsequently, Vietnam replaced the American Browning 50 machine gun with the Russian 12-7 machine gun. These armored vehicles were deployed on a large scale and proved highly effective in the 1979 Southwest Border Defense War, at times even overshadowing the role of other armored vehicles manufactured by the Soviet Union and China. Thanks to the M1, the Vietnam People's Army quickly gained an overwhelming advantage over the Khmer Rouge. In 2001, our country carried out a comprehensive repair and upgrade of approximately 80 M113 armored vehicles. The upgrades and repairs were carried out using a number of components purchased from commercial sources and repurposed parts salvaged from the Vietnam War. Today, the M113 remains a crucial component of Vietnam's tank and armored forces. Regarding personal weapons, do you know which type of rifle was most commonly used by the US military in Vietnam? Absolutely. That's the MEMS. You've probably heard a lot about them. Introduced in 1964 by Colt, the M116 assault rifle was considered the standard weapon of the US infantry for almost the entire duration of the Vietnam War. This gun is designed to be suitable for both left-handed and right-handed users. Compared to other American assault rifle models, the M16 is very luxurious, with its casing made entirely of metal, alloy, and plastic. Not a single detail is made of wood. In particular, its destructive power is absolutely terrifying. The M16 has a maximum rate of fire of up to 950 rounds per minute. Due to the use of small caliber ammunition, the muzzle velocity of the 5.5645 metal bullet is extremely high, reaching up to 9.6 when penetrating the body. The tip of the bullet will be stopped while the tail continues to maintain its acceleration, causing the bullet to flip upside down as it goes deeper into the body. Next, due to the uneven acceleration of the bullet, it will split in two and shatter into many pieces. The bullet tip will rotate 180 degrees until it exits the victim's body, while the bullet tail and other fragments travel deeper into the body. They suffered greatly if they were lucky enough to survive being shot, and it was especially difficult to trace shrapnel under wartime medical conditions. Moreover, this gun can even pierce through walls up to 10 cm thick if the distance is close enough. The entire process happened in the blink of an eye. Because the M16's bullet velocity is extremely high, its range is significantly longer than that of the AK-47 rifle, which is the standard equipment of our army. But the M16's drawbacks were so numerous that American soldiers in the Vietnam War were shouting that they didn't know how much bribe the Pentagon had received from Colt to allow their soldiers to use such a useless gun. The high rate of jamming was due to its unsuitability for Vietnam's hot and humid climate. Many small parts were difficult to maintain and prone to malfunction, etc. The frequent jamming was already a problem, but it made things even worse for American soldiers because each time a jam occurred, they almost had to disassemble their entire M16 or use special tools like pliers to clear the jam. Many American soldiers who died were found next to disassembled M16 rifles. Perhaps they died needlessly simply because their guns jammed at the wrong time. According to international figures, the United States provided approximately 1 million M16 rifles to the Saigon Army. When it came to abandoning ship, American soldiers didn't hesitate to throw away their weapons and run. Holding on wouldn't have changed the increasingly unfavorable situation. Therefore, the number of weapons we seized is certainly not small. After being stored, it is modified by us for continued use. A variant of the M16, Vietnamese, and known as the M18, appeared in service with the Vietnamese Special Forces and Coast Guard at the parade celebrating the 1000th anniversary of Thang Long, Hanoi on October 10, 2010. According to the History of the Vietnam People's Air Force, at its peak around The Saigon Air Force had 193 aircraft of various types and was considered one of the strongest forces in Southeast Asia. It is therefore not surprising that the U.S. military left behind many extremely modern aircraft on the battlefields of Vietnam, which became valuable war trophies for our Army, especially the UH-1 Iroquois helicopter. The Hu, also known as the Huey, is a multi-purpose military helicopter manufactured by Bell in 1952 at the request of the U.S. military. It was the first turbine-engine helicopter produced for the U.S. Armed Forces. The UH-1 was introduced at the same time that the U.S. was increasing its presence in Vietnam, and the sound of its rotor blades marked the official entry of the U.S. military into the war in our country in 1965. The hills and tropical jungles of Vietnam were a battlefield entirely different from those the United States had fought in before. This makes the role of helicopters extremely important because they can operate well even when severely damaged and are capable of maneuvering in a wide range of weather conditions. The UH-1's armament and 34-7, 62 mm hand-operated miniguns mounted in the side hatches, with a firing rate of up to 4,000 rounds per minute and a maximum range of 1,000 mm. With the configuration described above, it is typically only used to eliminate remaining pockets of resistance after bombing and rocket attacks by bombers or helicopters, creating favorable conditions for tanks, armored vehicles, and infantry to advance and take control of the battlefield. However, during the Vietnam War, a variant of the UH-1 helicopter was used by the U.S. military with much more powerful armament, the UH-1 gunship. Its configuration includes two common weapon systems. The first is the M22 with 6 AGM-2A tank missiles mounted on two pylons on the hull. In the practical conditions of Vietnam, this weapon system was very difficult to implement effectively because it was only suitable for large-scale anti-tank missions in open terrain. Therefore, this configuration was almost forgotten. The second, more commonly known as the M21 armament package, is also associated with the UH-1 gunship and includes two miniguns and two bundles of Hydra rocket launchers mounted on arms on either side of the fuselage, providing very powerful ground attack capabilities. The UH-1 gunship also has the advantage of being highly maneuverable, quick to turn, not picky about landing sites, able to land on soft, uneven ground such as rice paddies, and the troop deployment time is only 10 seconds. However, it is a type of vehicle that is easily shot down. Unlike armored vehicles, the UH-1 helicopter can be easily taken down with personal weapons, such as rifles. This made it an extremely valuable target for our forces, as each helicopter could carry dozens of American soldiers along with their full equipment and weapons. After the war, about 50 of these vehicles were captured by our troops as war trophies. That's just for the UH-1s alone. Our troops had captured approximately 877 aircraft, of which about 20% were in good condition and ready for immediate use. At Tan Son Nhut Airport alone, due to their hasty retreat, the U.S. military abandoned 76 military transport aircraft of various types and 26 fighter aircraft. Naturally, they became treasures for our Army. With these new aircraft, the Vietnamese Air Force was able to establish several additional air regiments to serve in the defense of the fatherland, while we captured a large quantity of weapons from the Army and Air Force. We only managed to seize a limited amount from the Navy, because when they lost the war, the soldiers of the Republic of Vietnam Army used warships, transport ship, and landing craft as a means of escaping abroad. Of course, there are some types of large ships that we still seize and put into service. In fact, many of them are still actively serving today. Regarding large warships, we acquired an Edsall class escort destroyer with a displacement of 590 tons, a Barnegat class frigate with a displacement of approximately 500 tons, and several smaller warships, since these are all American-made ships. Their weapon systems are somewhat incompatible with ours. According to the history of the Vietnam People's Navy, we independently modified several ships, replacing American-made cannons with Soviet-made ones and equipping them with short-range anti-aircraft missiles. In fact, some of our ships have even been tested with anti-ship cruise missiles to increase their firepower. That's not even counting the countless ammunition, bombs, missiles, rockets, howitzer, self-propelled artillery, transport vehicles, grenade launchers, machinery, aircraft components, etc., that the American Army abandoned while fleeing Vietnam. However, due to video length limitations, the Military Technical Academy can only introduce you to the 3 most outstanding individuals. According to experts, the value of weapons left behind by the United States in the Vietnam War is estimated at nearly $40 billion. This is clearly a huge number. Does anyone here know of any other famous American weapons that Vietnam acquired for modernization and deployment in its war? Please list their names in the comments below. And now, Viet Quang would like to say goodbye and wish you all a happy holiday with your family.